Hello, this is Julius from Basic Financials. I'm going to do a video today about additional permitted subscription ISAs. You may well have heard of that before. It's basically the additional permitted subscription is something that you inherit from your spouse, or if you've been in a civil partnership and they die, then you can inherit their allowance. Now, basically what it means is if your spouse or civil partner died with ISAs, whether that be investment ISAs or cash ISAs, then you inherit the amount that they've got in there as an additional permitted subscription to an ISA. So normally you're only allowed to put in £20,000 into an ISA a year. You can have that as a mixture of cash, investment ISAs, or one or either of them. But this additional permitted subscription allows you to put more in. And again, normally you can only open one cash ISA in a tax year. But the additional permitted subscription ISA, if you're opening up an ISA just to use that doesn't count within that limit. Now, you might, it sounds simple, but you may well come across problems because banks do know about it, obviously, but various branches and places within the banks don't know everything of what to do. It seems I'm talking in July 2023, so hopefully in time things will get a bit better. They have been going a while, so you'd hope it would all be a bit more straightforward by now. But there are different ways of doing it, and I think that's where the complication arises. The important thing to remember is that you're not. You might be inheriting the cash or the shares, whatever it is, but that's not relevant really. It's the allowance that you're inheriting that's the main thing. Now, one way of transferring it, one way of using the allowance is to actually transfer the cash ISA or the if it's an investment ISA, to actually have the investments transferred to you, what they call in specie. So I think they still do sell them and then rebuy them in your name. But it's effectively just transferring the actual investment ISA over to you. So for example, if you've got if your spouse had an investment ISA with, say, Hargreaves Lansdown, for example, you could either set up a Hargreaves Lansdown account, or if you've got one already, use that and ask them. You fill out various forms, but you ask them to transfer the amount over to you. And if they had, for example, £150,000 in a Hargreaves Lansdown investment ISA, that could all go over to your account as an investment ISA. Now, that's quite useful because an ISA is, especially if you're talking about cash ISAs, it's quite useful to have them in a tax-free wrapper at the moment, because of the interest rates are high, and therefore you're more likely to get taxed on the interest, because the interest allowance is only £1,000. I'm talking about cash ISAs there. But, so that's one way of doing it. But if you're told, oh, you haven't got a Hargreaves Lansdown account, say you don't want that investment, you just want to have the cash. You only have a cash ISA, you don't want an investment ISA, and Hargreaves Lansdown might say to you, oh no, you can't do that, we'd have to set one up. Well, that's not really right, because you still use the allowance. Basically, if you want to set up a new cash ISA, you would go to whoever you want to set up the cash ISA with, and you would say, I want to set up a new cash ISA using the additional permitted subscription of my spouse from another provider. And what they would do is, to say that's £150,000, you would fill out the new cash ISA form, but it's a new cash ISA using the additional permitted subscription. So this is where sometimes it gets a little bit confusing with people in a branch. They might not know quite what that is, but it's a new cash ISA using an additional permitted subscription from a deceased spouse or civil partner. You would fill out that form. Say it's coming, or the ISA, say that the ISA was with the provider, Hargreaves Lansdown, whoever it was, you put in the amount that you think it is, but they will write off to Hargreaves Lansdown to establish the amount, and then they should be able to. Obviously, you've got to make sure you've got the funds to be able to do that £150,000. You say where you want it to come from. It doesn't have to come from Hargreaves Lansdown. It can come from anywhere where you've got the money, or if you haven't got the money, you can get the Hargreaves Lansdown to cash in everything first, pay it into your current account somewhere, and then do the form then. It doesn't matter that it's all gone. Somebody else could have inherited those shares. You still get the allowance. Getting lost now. Yes, so that cash ISA would then be set up in your name. It doesn't count as a new cash ISA for your one a year, and that subscription is totally outside of your 20,000. So you could set up a new cash ISA somewhere else if you wanted to. I think that's probably. Oh, there is another thing. If you are using if you're transferring the allowance from another provider, then there's another form that goes with the new cash ISA if you're doing it as a cash ISA, and that's an application to transfer the additional permitted subscription, or APS as they call it, from another provider to them. So there will be two forms. Now you could, in theory, be doing it from lots of providers. If you had cash ISAs or investment ISAs or a mixture of them all, if your spouse had them with lots of different providers, and they say they all added up to 500,000, lovely. You could actually fill out the new form and ask for do transfer forms from all of those providers, and then your new provider would write to all of those providers. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say as well. The way they value it, if your spouse died after a date in 2018, I can't remember what that date is, then the value will basically be the higher of the value when the money gets transferred to you, when the account is closed and the money is transferred, not necessarily to you, or when that actually finishes, because it might be going to somebody else, or transferred to the estate, I suppose is the technical way of thinking about it, or when it's the higher that value, or the value at the date of death. So if the stock market plummeted, then it may well be at the value of the date of death, but normally you'd probably find that it's the value when it closes. If your spouse died before 2018, well, that's probably not going to be relevant now, because you can only use this APS allowance up to 3 years after the date of death. So you've got to have done something with it within 3 years. But if it worked before, then it used to be that the value would be at the date of death, and that was it. But now it's probably going to be the value when it closes. Yes, you've got 3 years to do it. Remember, it's not the actual money that's in there, it's the amount of it that you're inheriting. It's the allowance. That's the crucial thing. And just persist. If you come across any problems with banks, just keep going, because you will get there in the end. Good luck. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and if you've got any questions, just please leave them in the boxes below. See you again for another video sometime. Bye.